Sarah said firmly. Harriet don't have no poor girls like us for her friends. She gonna try to make you her slave. She tried it with me when I came to school last year, but I wouldn't let her. That's why she don't like me. She gonna hurt you just like she hurt me last year. Well, maybe Harriet changed from when you first come up here, Addy said. Harriet ain't gonna hurt me. She say she got plenty to teach me, and I got plenty to learn. As the weeks passed, Addy's fascination with Harriet grew. Every day Harriet wore a beautiful dress. Each one seemed brand new, and schoolwork came so easily to Harriet. She was always the first one in the class to finish her lesson, so she had time to look at Addy's slate and point out Addy's mistakes. Sometimes Addy didn't understand the corrections Harriet made, but questions seemed to annoy Harriet. So Addy saved her questions to ask Sarah at lunchtime or when they walked home together after school. Addy worked very hard, and so she was discouraged after her first spelling test. Out of the 20 words on the test, Addy spelled 12 wrong. When Miss Dunn handed back Addy's test at the end of the day, she was encouraging. Look how many words you got right, Addy. If you keep learning this fast, you'll be one of the best spellers in the class. Maybe your mother could help you with the words you missed. Yes, ma'am, Addy said softly. She didn't want to tell Miss Dunn that Mama couldn't read or write, and she didn't want Harriet to overhear her say it. When Addy and Sarah were walking home after school, Addy said, I ain't never gonna catch up. Younger girls can read and spell better than me. Maybe it's too late for me to learn. It ain't never too late, said Sarah. You can't learn everything at once. Learning goes slow. I didn't do so good on the test neither. I should have studied harder. I studied hard, and I still didn't do good, Addy said. How many did you get right? How many did you get right? Sarah asked. I asked first, Addy said. Sarah said, well, I got 'em all wrong 'cause I didn't study at all. My papa can't hardly find work, so my mama and me been taking in extra washing. Sometimes I ain't got time to do my lessons. Maybe we can do our lessons together sometime, Addy said. I'd like that, Sarah said, sounding more cheerful. Sarah left Addy at the door of Mrs. Ford's shop, and Addy stepped inside. As she headed toward the stairs, she saw Mama sitting in the back of the shop. She was crying. Mama, what's the matter? Addy asked. Mama dried her eyes on the sleeve of her dress. You can come in, Addy, she said. Mrs. Ford ain't here. She went out and left these packages for me to deliver. She wrote down the addresses on this here paper. I ain't dare tell her I can't read. She gonna be coming back soon, expecting to see these packages gone, but I don't know where to take them. I can take them, Addy said. She looked at the addresses, but her heart sank when she realized she could read only one of them. Then an idea came to her. Mama, Sarah can help. She can read way better than me, and she know her way around Philadelphia. Mama looked doubtful. Mama, let me go catch up with Sarah. It's the only way, Addy begged. All right, Mama said after a moment, but y'all be extra careful. Addy grabbed the packages and paper and started running. She caught Sarah a few blocks away and explained the problem. Sarah stood the paper for a moment. Then I know where these streets is. Let's go. Sarah hurried through the busy streets with Addy rushing along beside her. Sarah pointed to the street signs and read the names aloud to Addy. She showed her how the numbers on the houses went in order. Addy headed the way. The girls walked back to the shop. As they walked in the door, Mama threw her arms around them. Sarah, you've been a big help. I don't know what we'd do without you, she said. Just then, Mrs. Ford returned. When she saw Addy and Sarah, she said, What's going on here, Mrs. Walker? This is a place of business, you know. Yes, ma'am. The girls were just leaving, Mama said quickly. She squeezed Sarah's hand to thank her again. Sarah headed for home, and Addy hurried up the stairs to the garret. That evening, as Mama was cooking supper, she sounded worried. I ain't got a right to this job. because I ain't been on board. I gotta learn to read or find something else to do. Mama, I can teach you how to read, Addy exclaimed. Mama shook her head. I think it's too late for me, she said. Sarah say it ain't never too late, said Addy. She took her spelling paper out of her satchel. I got most of them wrong, she said, Mama. But Miss Dunn say if you help me, I'm one of the best spellers at school. But I don't know how to help you, Addy, Mama replied. I don't know the letters. I can teach them to you, Addy answered, and I'll get practice from helping you. Mama's eyes looked for a moment at the cowrie shell hanging around Addy's neck. Mama had given Addy the shell when they were escaping the plantation. It came from Addy's great-grandmother, who had been captured in Africa and brought to America as a slave. All right, Addy, I'll try, Mama said. Our family done faced tougher things than this. Ain't no change coming overnight, but by and by, maybe we'll both learn. Addy smiled at Mama. Let's have our first lesson tonight. As the weeks passed and it started to get cool, Mama kept a small fire in the stove in the evenings. Sometimes when they made bread or meat pies for supper, Addy showed Mama how to spell words by forming letters with scraps of leftover dough. Mama loved to write Sam, Papa, and Esther. Seeing their names make me feel closer to them, she said. After they ate, they went over Addy's lessons. Addy taught Mama how to count, showing Mama what she had learned on the abacus at school by using beans on the table. Every day, Addy and Sarah went back and forth to school together, sometimes stopping to pick up colorful leaves or smooth chestnuts that fell from the trees. Sarah taught Addy how to read the names on street signs and shops as they walked along. One brisk morning, as they passed by a grocery store, Addy stopped to read the sign. Wilson Brothers Grocery. Eggs, 48 cents a dozen. That's right, Sarah said. You get real smart. You've been a good teacher, Addy said, smiling at her friend. But you and me not as smart as Harriet. You should see her papers. All 100s. She already doing multiplication. Sarah didn't say anything. She turned her head to look at a shop window. Did you see that blue dress Harriet had on yesterday? Addy sighed. It was so pretty. I never even seen her in it before. She must have 10 or 15 dresses. Let's talk about something else, Sarah cut in. I don't like talking about her, or even thinking about her. But Addy liked thinking about Harriet. Harriet had everything that Addy had dreamed freedom would bring her. Harriet had fancy dresses. Harriet was smart. Harriet was sure of herself. When they were at their desk together, Harriet helped Addy with her schoolwork, but Harriet never invited Addy to be part of her group. Harriet had many friends. Her friends wore fancy dresses and matching hair ribbons. They buzzed around Harriet as if she were a queen bee. They ate lunch together and played at recess. Addy and Sarah walked home the same way Harriet and her friends did, but Addy and Sarah were never asked to join them. One day, at the end of October, Harriet and her friends were walking home just ahead of Addy and Sarah. Addy started walking faster. What you hurrying up for? Sarah asked sharply. Addy whispered back, Let's catch up with them. You can if you want, Sarah answered, but I ain't walking with them. Aw, come on. We all going the same way, Addy said softly, catching hold of Sarah's arm. I said I ain't walking with them, Sarah repeated loudly. Harriet stopped and turned around. I heard you, Sarah, she snapped. Nobody asked you to walk with us. Harriet smiled a cool smile at Addy. But you can come with us, Addy. Addy got a warm, excited feeling. She turned to look at Sarah, but Sarah wouldn't look at her. Sarah looked down at her scuffed boots. Addy didn't know what to do. She knew she would hurt Sarah if she went with Harriet. Sarah isn't the boss of you, Harriet said in a loud voice as Addy hesitated. You can walk when you want, Addy. Your decision. Harriet gave Sarah a nasty look, and then she and her friends disappeared around the corner. Chapter 4. The Lines Are Drawn. That evening, Addy was studying her spelling words as Mama set flour on the table and began rolling out a piece of dough. She was making biscuits to go with their supper of black-eyed peas. Addy gathered scraps of dough as Mama began cutting the biscuits. "One word I've been wanting to learn to spell is family," Mama said to Addy. "You know how to spell that word yet?" "I do," Addy answered. She started working the scraps of dough into thin strips and made an F and then an A. "Mama, what do you think Esther doing right now?" Addy asked as she continued making the letters. "I suspect she getting ready to eat her supper too," Mama said. "I miss her," Addy said. "And Papa and Sam." She sighed deeply. "Mama, when we gonna live together again like a real family?" Mama sighed too. "I can't say when we'll be together again, Addy," she said. "But I don't want you thinking that we ain't a family 'cause we ain't all in one place. We just as much a family as we was back in North Carolina." Addy finished spelling family with the dough pieces. F-A-M-I-L-Y, Mama read. "Family. That's us." "That's us," Addy smiled softly. The next day in school, Miss Dunn talked about the war and about the progress the soldiers from the North were making. "It appears that our Union troops are winning the war," she said proudly. The class cheered. Miss Dunn went on. "Now, it's important for the Union soldiers to know we support them." Harriet interrupted. "My mother does volunteer nursing to help wounded colored soldiers," she said importantly. "She says many of the soldiers she sees are missing an arm or a leg." Some of the children groaned. "I'm sure that's true," Miss Dunn said. "This has been a very bloody war. The soldiers who make it back alive are lucky, even those who are missing limbs. Many soldiers are dying in battle. All of the men who go off to fight for the North are our heroes. They need to know we care about them. That's why the whole school is going to the Baltimore Depot today to help send off a troop of colored soldiers." An excited buzz went through the room. "I wish I was old enough to fight," Billy Maples blurted out. "Even if I lost a leg, I'd still be a hero." Sarah raised her hand. "Miss Dunn, why there got to be a war at all?" she asked. Miss Dunn paused for a moment. "Sometimes people fight even when they don't want to. They fight for what they believe is right," she said. "I still wish there wasn't no war," Sarah said. Before Miss Dunn could respond to her, Harriet turned around in her seat and said to Sarah, "You know the war is going to free the slaves. You should be glad for the war. You were a slave yourself." "Harriet, that will be enough," Miss Dunn said. "Almost all of us colored people used to be slaves." "Not me. My family has always been free," Harriet said proudly. Addy could see a tense look come over Miss Dunn's face. "Girls and boys, almost all colored people came to America as slaves," she said. "If you weren't a slave, someone in your family probably was. One of the reasons there is a war now is because a line exists between colored and white people. That line is slavery." Miss Dunn turned and faced Harriet. "We don't need to do or say anything that draws more lines between people. The entire country has been divided in two. Let's not make differences based on who was a slave or wasn't, or anything else. Is that clear, class?" "Yes, Miss Dunn," came the answer from all the students together. "Harriet," Miss Dunn said sharply, "do I make myself clear?" "Yes, ma'am," Harriet mumbled, embarrassed. "Good," said Miss Dunn. "When we go to the depot, I want you all to be on your best behavior. Now line up with your desk partners." As the class left the building, Harriet put her arm around Addy's shoulders. "So, what did you decide?" Harriet asked. "Are you walking home with me and my friends today after school, or do you have to ask Sarah's permission?" I don't have to ask her permission, Addy said quickly. I'm going to walk with you. Good, Harriet said. She sounded satisfied. By the time the students arrived at the railroad station, a crowd had gathered. The students lined up along the street with the other people to watch the soldiers march by straight and tall in their blue uniforms trimmed with brass buttons. Addy and her class cheered and applauded, but as Addy looked around, she saw that not everyone was cheering. Some women and children were crying as they watched the soldiers march off to war. Then Addy saw one soldier who looked like her brother Sam. Suddenly she felt like crying herself. Addy turned to Harriet and said, "My brother wanted to fight in the war." "Really?" replied Harriet. She didn't sound interested. "My uncle is serving with the 3rd Infantry. That was the first colored regiment organized in the state." "Oh," said Addy. She wished she knew as much about where Sam was as Harriet knew about her uncle. On the way back to school, the boys marched straight and tall, just as the soldiers had, and the class sang "Rally Round the Flag." When school ended that day, Addy gathered her lunch pail and books and went to Sarah's desk. "I'm going to walk with Harriet and her friends today," Addy said firmly. "She asked me, you can come too if you want." "No, I can't," Sarah said, her voice shaking. Addy could see that Sarah was hurt. She was starting to say something to Sarah when she heard Harriet call, "Come on, Addy." Addy turned to see Harriet surrounded by her friends. She gestured for Addy to come. "Go on," Sarah said bitterly. "You know you want to." Without looking at Sarah, Anne to join Harriet. Once she caught up with Harriet and her friends, she glanced at Sarah. Addy felt torn, but Harriet distracted her. "How do you think you'll do in the spelling match on Friday?" Harriet asked Addy. "I hope I'm going to do great," Addy replied. "I've been studying real hard." "Miss Dunn gave us 7 words to learn?" asked Mavis, one of Harriet's friends. She was a tall girl with sandy brown hair. "Harriet's going to win," another girl said. "She doesn't even have to study." Addy looked back over her shoulder again for Sarah, but Sarah had disappeared. "We've been going to my house after school to study for the spelling match," Harriet said. "Maybe you can come with us sometime, Addy. Here." Harriet handed Addy her books. One by one, the other girls piled their books on top. "These are kind of heavy," Addy said. "Why I got to carry them all?" "Well, if you want to be with us, you have to be our flunky," Harriet said. "What's that?" Addy asked, struggling with the books. Harriet and her friends giggled. "Oh, Addy, I can tell that you just got off the plantation," said Harriet. She cast a sly look at Mavis, and then said to Addy, "You have to be a flunky because you are the new girl. It's sort of like you have to pass a test to be friends with us." "What kind of test?" Addy asked. "Oh, I can't tell you too much. That would be cheating," Harriet said. The girls all laughed again, and Addy felt too embarrassed to ask more. She felt that the girls all had a secret that they weren't sharing with her. When the group reached Mrs. Ford's shop, the girls quickly took their books off Addy's pile. "I'll see y'all tomorrow," Addy called as they walked away. "Bye," Harriet called, not bothering to look back at Addy. Inside the shop, Mama and Mrs. Ford were busily working. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Ford," Addy said. "I know this is a place of business, but can I talk to Mama for a minute?" "Make it quick," Mrs. Ford said, never looking up from her work. "Mama, can I go to Harriet's house to study for the spelling match?" Addy asked. "I told you about her before. She my desk partner, and she invited me." "I suppose it'd be fine," Mama answered, "but only if Sarah go with you." Addy suddenly felt sick to her stomach. Harriet would never include her if Sarah had to come along. "Where is your friend?" Mrs. Ford asked. Addy looked away. "She ain't want to walk with me today," she said. "That don't sound like Sarah," Mama said, surprised. "It's true, Mama," Addy said quickly. Anyhow, I know my way around now. As Addy slowly climbed the long stairs to the garret, she tried to convince herself that what she had just told Mama was true. Sarah had not wanted to walk with her today. She also tried to figure out a way she could go to Harriet's without Sarah. Addy knew a line had been drawn between Sarah and Harriet, and neither one would cross it. Chapter 5. The Spelling Match. The next morning, Addy and Sarah walked most of the way to school in silence. Finally, Addy asked, "You angry with me?" "I ain't angry," Sarah said. They walked the rest of the way to school without talking. As soon as they arrived, Addy hurried to her desk. Harriet was already sitting there. "My mama say I could come to your house to study," Addy said happily. "Really?" Harriet said. She sounded cool. "I'm sure you have lots of studying left to do, but I don't really need to study anymore." "I've been studying real hard," Addy said. "We could help each other." "Well, maybe," Harriet said. All day, Addy felt jumpy with excitement. She couldn't keep her mind on her work. She kept thinking about the fine house Harriet must have, filled with dolls and other toys. Maybe Harriet would let her play with them this afternoon. When the day was finally over, Sarah came up to Addy. "You ready to walk home?" she asked. "Well, I'm walking with Harriet," Addy said. "I'm going to her house." "Fine," Sarah said flatly. "Go with her. I don't care." Her voice did not waver this time. She turned away from Addy. "Sarah," Addy began, but Harriet's friends surrounded her. The girls dumped their books in Addy's arms again. They were every bit as heavy as the water bucket she used to carry back on the plantation. But Addy didn't complain. At last, she was going to Harriet's house. "Did you see Sarah today?" Harriet said in a mean voice. "Her dress was so wrinkled, it looked like she slept in it. And she had a big brown stain on the front of it. Mother one can't even keep Sarah's clothes clean," said Harriet. All the girls laughed except Addy. "That's not funny," she said. "Her mama worked hard." "Must not be working hard enough, because Sarah is a mess," Harriet said softly. Harriet said, "Of course it matters. Anyway, what do you care about Sarah, Addy? You're on our side now. At least your mother keeps you looking presentable, even if you do wear that same old dress every day. Don't you have any others?" "No," Addy said, swallowing hard. "Addy looks good enough to be our flunky, though," Mavis said. The girls all giggled. "That's true," Harriet said lightly. "Sarah didn't, but you, Addy, are a perfect flunky." Addy smiled weakly, but she had a sick feeling in her stomach. When the girls reached Mrs. Ford's shop, Harriet suddenly took her books from the pile Addy was carrying. Addy was confused. "Hey, I can go with y'all today," she said. "I can study at your house, Harriet." "I don't think so. Not today," Harriet said. "But the spelling match is tomorrow," Addy protested. Harriet shrugged. "Well, maybe you can come someday, but not today," she repeated. "Come on," she said to the other girls. They grabbed their books and hurried away, leaving Addy alone at the shop door. Addy stood there, unable to move. Finally, she ran up to the garret and threw herself on the bed. Her face burned as if she had been stung by a swarm of bees. Sarah had been right. Harriet did not want Addy to be her friend. She just wanted Addy to be her slave. And even worse, Addy had chosen to be her slave. Addy reached for the cowrie shell Mama had given her and cried with shame. The next day was the day of the spelling match. When Addy woke up, Mama was already at the stove stirring a pot of grits. Addy got up and washed in a small basin beside the bed. She looked for the pink dress that Mama always laid out over the back of her chair, but her dress wasn't there. In its place was a blue skirt and jacket trimmed in black braid and a crisp white shirt. Addy stood staring at them. I made them out of some leftover cloth from the shop. I want you to look your best for that spelling match, Mama said, smiling. You surprised? Oh, Mama, thank you, Addy said, throwing her arms around Mama. They nicer than anything I ever dreamed about. Mama took the clothes off the chair and helped Addy dress. I've been staying up late for weeks now working on them, hoping I could surprise you, said Mama, fastening the skirt. When Mama stood back to admire Addy in her new clothes, her dark eyes sparkled with pride. Look at you. You look like a fancy city girl, Mama said. No matter how you do in the spelling match, I'm going to be proud of you. You done worked real hard. But as Addy walked to school that morning in her new outfit, she didn't feel she deserved the new clothes. Once she got to school, the hours dragged by slowly. Addy became more and more nervous during the morning lessons. When the spelling match finally started, her stomach felt queasy. Harriet was given the first word to spell, carriage. She rattled off the letters quickly. C-A-R-R-I-A-G-E. Correct, Miss Dunn said. Sarah, you have the next word. Spell button. B-U-T-T-O-N. Sarah spelled in a soft voice. Correct, said Miss Dunn. Addy, it's your turn. Spell tomorrow. Addy started to spell quickly, just as Harriet had. T-O-M-O-R-O. But then she stopped. This was one of the words she had trouble spelling. She stopped and thought. She knew she could spell this word. She started again, this time more slowly. T-O-M-O-R-R-O-W. Correct, Miss Dunn said. Addy breathed a sigh of relief. At least she wouldn't make a mistake in the first match. Harriet leaned over and whispered, I'm going to win, and my mother said I can have friends over after school for ice cream to celebrate. She said I could bring 5 girls. I might ask you. Addy said nothing. Her stomach felt worse. After 2 rounds, half the class had missed a spelling word and had to sit down. Addy was glad that Sarah was still in the contest. Sarah's next was Sarah began. A, and then she paused. Addy closed her eyes. O-U-N-T, she thought. Come on, Sarah, couldn't spell it. A-C-C-O-U-N-T. Sarah began again. A-C-C-O-N-T, she said. I'm sorry, Miss Dunn said. That's not correct. Addy's turn was next. She took a deep breath. She knew how to spell the word, but she didn't want to hurt Sarah anymore. She decided she would spell it wrong on purpose to apologize to Sarah. But before Miss Dunn called on Addy, Harriet whispered to her again. I can't believe Sarah missed such an easy one, she said. She is so dumb. Addy felt a flash of anger. I'll show her, Addy thought. When Miss Dunn called on her, Addy spelled the word correctly. The spelling match went into the 3rd round. Addy spelled bridge correctly. In the 4th round, she got scissors right. When the 5th round came, there were 2 spellers left, Harriet and Addy. Harriet had the first word. Principle, Miss Dunn said. We all live our lives by principles. Principle. P-R-I-N-S-I-P-L-E, Harriet said quickly. I'm sorry, Miss Dunn said. That is not correct. The students started talking among themselves. Quiet, Miss Dunn demanded. Give Addy a chance to think in peace. Addy, you must spell the word correctly to win. Principle. Addy spelled out the letters. P-R-I-N-C-I-P-L-E. "Correct!" Miss Dunn exclaimed. She beamed with delight as she said, "Addie Walker, you have truly earned this prize." Miss Dunn came over to Addie and pinned a medal on her jacket. "Your hard work has paid off," she said. "Class, please clap for Addie." The boys and girls clapped and cheered. It was time to end, and Miss Dunn announced that the class could eat outside because it was a warm day. Several girls rushed up to Addie to congratulate her before they left the classroom. Harriet stood at the edge of the group. "Well," she said briskly, "if I had studied at all, I would have beaten you. Anyway, Miss Dunn gave you easier words." "You're just jealous, Harriet," Mavis said. "Addie spelled the word you missed." "I'm not jealous of her," Harriet shrugged. But Mavis was saying to Addie, "You have on such a pretty new outfit. Where did your mother buy it?" "She ain't buy it. She made it," Addie answered. "It's so nice," Mavis said, touching the braid on the jacket. "I wish my mother could sew like this." Harriet cut into the conversation. "We're eating out on the front steps if you want to join us," she said to Addie. "Come on, girls." Addie watched as Harriet and her friends went outside. Then she sat down at her desk, pretending she was looking for something inside it. She felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Miss Dunn. "This is a very special day for you, Addie. Why are you in here all by yourself?" the teacher asked. Addie kept rooting through her desk. "I don't think you'll find what you're looking for inside that desk, Addie," Miss Dunn said. Addie still did not look up. Miss Dunn reached for Addie's hand. "Addie, look at me," she said gently. Addie slowly looked up. "I suspect you're feeling bad because lines have been drawn between some girls in this class." "Miss Dunn," Addie said, "I don't know how to get rid of the lines. I done hurt Sarah, and I wouldn't blame her if she never spoke to me again." "We all make mistakes," Miss Dunn said. "I suspect you've learned a lesson about friendship, but you can't make things better by hiding in here. You need to think about what you stand for and act on it." Miss Dunn smiled at Addie and then left her alone. Addie took her lunch pail from the floor, opened the lid, and looked to see what Mama had packed. When she saw what was on top, she closed the lid and hurried out of the classroom. Addie went around to the side of the building. She stopped when she saw Sarah sitting alone under a small tree. Addie took a deep breath. Then she walked up to Sarah and knelt beside her. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," Addie said. "Please forgive me. I wanted to be friends with Harriet because she was popular and smart and rich, but she ain't a real friend. I know you is. I never meant to hurt you. I still want to be your friend," Sarah said, smiling that sunny smile Addie had seen the first day she and Mama had arrived at the pier. Then Sarah reached out and took the medal. "I wanted you to win so bad," Sarah said. "You too. Say I missed your word," Addie said. "Maybe we can study spelling together right now." She reached into her lunch pail. There on top were 4 cookies Mama had made, each in the shape of a letter. L-O-V-E. "Here," Addie said, holding the cookies on her outstretched hand. "This is our first word." Chapter 1. Winds of Winter. Addie Walker knew that winter had come to Philadelphia even before she opened her eyes. An icy wind whistled through the crack in the garret window. Mama had just gotten up, letting a puff of cold air in the bed when she lifted the heavy quilt. But her place was still warm, so Addie snuggled into it. Mama's gentle voice called to her. "Addie, honey, I need your help over here. Snow's coming right in through the window." Addie peeked out from under the quilt. In the dim gray light of morning, she saw Mama straining to close the window. Its panes were white with frost. A little pile of snow had built up on the windowsill, and more snow had blown across the floor. "I'm coming, Mama," she said. Addy crawled out of bed and shivered over to the window to help Mama. Together they pulled down on the window